Welcome back to Power CEOs. If you are just tuning in, you're going to want to go to nowmedia.tv, click on shows, go to Power CEOs, and catch the first half of today's show because it has been epic as always, and you're not going to want to miss a moment of it. But we're going to switch gears and go to our AI moment of the week. I have with me our resident expert in all things AI, Dr. Alan Badeau. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jen. It's great to be here.
All right, so we talked about this in the break. I want to talk about how do we avoid the common AI pitfalls and mistakes. So I want to just ask you, why do AI initiatives fail? What is it, or what are the top reasons that AI implementations fail?
Yeah, the first reason is that there's no plan, that they think that they can just grab a piece of software, they can install it, and you're going to see rainbows and unicorns come from the results, and that just doesn't happen. You've got to have a plan. You've got to understand how you're gonna test it, what you want from the test, how it's going to be able to be used by your users or your own employees. There's a whole list of things that have to be done before you start to try to build it, to develop it, to use it, all those other things. That's the primary reason. The second reason usually is because you've become so tool dependent that you think that if I just go with this tool, it's going to solve all of my problems. And like any other tool that's out there, it doesn't work that way either. You've got to have a very good understanding of what the tool does, what the tool is really good at, what the tool is not very good at, and a lot of people you will forget about that thing because they just have only tried to focus on the positives, but there's always going to be a positive and a negative around these AI tools. They don't all do the same thing. They don't all behave the same. They don't all act the same, and you're not going to get the same results for different problems. So you've got to make sure that you understand what the tool can do and what it can't do. And then the third thing is around the people. You've got to make sure that whoever is doing the pilot or integrating it or whatever that use case is going to be, that they have bought into it, that they want to do it, that they're going to be the ones that are really pushing forward the initiative, and that whatever that rollout mechanism is, they are involved from the start, not as an afterthought. And if you do it as an afterthought, it's guaranteed it's going to fail.
Yeah, and what you're really speaking to on the people front is AI as augmentation of staff, not replacement of staff. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen, and you probably have as well, is the leadership seems to think that this is going to just take out our workforce altogether and eliminate the need for people. But the reality is that's just simply not the case.
Yep.
So I heard, and I just want to reiterate, lack of strategy. If it doesn't align with our business strategy and we don't have a plan for implementation, you're planning to fail. It's like everything else. I heard making sure you understand the tool and what it does versus what it doesn't do. So why don't we dive into how do we as entrepreneurs and executives determine what it's not going to do? Like, what are the key questions we should be asking of a vendor? For example, we've got a strategic plan. We've identified what we want to replace, and now we're interviewing vendors and looking at the tools. What should we be asking so that we could find those gaps in what the tool isn't good at and what it doesn't do so that we can be more informed as we move forward?
Yeah, and the easiest thing to do is make sure that you have your own set of boundaries on what the tool is going to be allowed to do and what the tool is not going to be allowed to do. If you have those boundaries, then you can start to form questions around that. There's, I have a list of about 50 questions that I pull through and grab and say, okay, you know what? I want to deploy it for customer service. Then it's going to do this, this, and this with the customer, but it's not going to be allowed to do something else. Or, I want to use it for supply chain or some logistics management, stocking, shelves, whatever that is. Same thing. It's going to be able to do inventory tracking, but it's not going to be able to do automated reordering, those kind of things, because a vendor is only ever going to show you the positive things that it does. And if you only look at those, then you get that shiny object syndrome where, oh yeah, it's going to do great things, and it's going to be, fantastic when you roll it out. But if you don't ask the hard questions and the ones that, oftentimes they're not going to show you, then you have made an assumption probably that it can do those by default, when in essence it really can't. And so ask the vendor specifically around your problem set. How do you apply it to X? How do you use it with, under certain situations? Give them examples specifically and have them explain it to you. If you can have them do a live demo, then that's what you want to do, because you need to see it in action, or you need to play with it to make sure that it's, it's easy to use, like they say, or it's easy to integrate, like they say. So those are just some of the fundamentals that you have to look at with, as you're going through a process. It has to be a process. It's not like going to the grocery store and buying certain things. You have to go step by step. And of course, they're going to want to push it as fast as they can, but you've just got to make sure that you're comfortable, that your questions are answered, and you're ready to go.
And I want to kind of bring this forward because you and I have talked about this in the past, and this is about once we find something and we feel like we've de-risked and we have a full understanding of what a tool does versus does not do. We've identified that this is a partner, a vendor partner that we actually want to engage in this, because it's a long-term relationship. It's not just one and done. Like, there's maintenance and ongoing things that happen with this. Once we've gotten there, can you speak to the importance of having a pilot before we go full project? And what we as executives should be looking at in that pilot?
Yeah, the challenge around these AI tools is none of us really know how they're going to scale. And, because they're so different, and you can apply it in so many different ways, that you cannot go to one business model or one pilot model and say it's going to apply to, a different situation. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have a pilot so that you can, one, test that the AI is actually going to be successful in what you want it to do. But then second, you've got to look at the metrics that come from that pilot. Meaning, I'm using a certain model, and that model is giving me a great result, but it takes 25 minutes to get the result back. Well, if you've got to get the information to your end customer in 5 minutes, for example, that's not any good. That's not that you can't do that. So you've got to find a balance between that. Maybe my model's not quite as accurate. I've backed it down, but it gives me the information I need to get to them at a good pace, and something that you can work with. And so infrastructure, that's another thing. You've got to make sure that you've planned out your infrastructure, that it can support all of those things. So instead of looking at it as, oh, here's the hardware that I'm going to run on, it's everything else that comes along with that toolkit. It's not just how I'm going to roll it out, how I'm going to use it. Does it meet my user needs? But it's, what's the interface look like? What's the interaction look like? What's the experience of the customer? What's the experience of my employees if you're going to use it internally? And so there's so many different things that you have to look at, if you don't have a pilot and you don't have something to base it on, and you don't figure out where it's going to break and how you can fix it and do all those other things, then what happens is when you roll it out, you're going to get, I call them black swan moments, but from a business perspective, a black swan is something that shuts things down for you, right? You have a lot of those moments, and they could have been prevented.
Yeah, and so everything I'm hearing is make sure you have a plan, make sure you test the plan, you understand what it is that you hope to achieve, and run a pilot so that you know that, hey, this tool actually does achieve the initiatives that I'm looking for in a timely fashion, with an accurate enough result so that we can move forward. And so I want to talk about scaling this, but I think that's going to be a whole other conversation. But can you just, in summation, if we're looking, we've got all these things in place and we're moving into pilot, what is the number one thing that you wish entrepreneurs and executives would know before they start the pilot, as someone who does this for a living?
Yeah, I would say that they have to know what the experience is going to be for the user, and or at least know the goal of the experience that you want the user to have. oftentimes, just like, and this is not a new problem, it's a carryover from a software development problem where, again, you are rolling out something that is going to either be used by the user or interface with the user or something like that. And if you don't have that defined and understand how you want to provide that, to your end customer, then what happens is you start to morph how the software is behaving, and you fit the customer into that part of the process instead of having the customer be the center of the universe and everything else work around it. And that's a recipe for disaster. Disaster financially for the business, disaster integration wise, and then also disaster pilot wise, because it's just going to fail. Your users are going to be ticked off and they'll go somewhere else. And so you will really feel the wrath if you don't have all that stuff in alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. User X is so important. User research, understanding what you're doing. And that's with any product or service development.
That's
And,
right.
and I see it's exactly the same here. Thank you so much for your insights. How can people reach out to you to learn more?
Well, they can go to my website, alanbadeau.ai, or they can watch me on Wednesdays with AI Today on the Now Media network. That's where my show is on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Also on LinkedIn, they can get a hold of me on LinkedIn, and I try to respond to as many questions or comments as I can. I know I'm a little bit behind this week. I was sick last week, but I'm making up for it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your expertise. And you, yes, you stick around. We will be right back after these messages.